You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Choctaw Nation. Now, the Choctaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by the Choctaw Nation. The Choctaw people have a rich history and a bright future. At the Choctaw Cultural Center, you can take part in a story 14,000 years in the making. Stroll through our immersive exhibits portraying Choctaw life from the moment our ancestors emerged from the Nani Weha in Mississippian homelands to the Trail of Tears, where we lost so many loved ones, and finally to the modern-day tribe making a positive impact on local communities throughout southeastern Oklahoma. Try your hand at our social dancing and stickball and learn more about our vibrant culture through demonstrations, workshops, and classes. The kids will have a blast in our Luxie Activity Center. The Choctaw Cultural Center is more than a museum. It's a living, breathing experience. Visit choctawculturalcenter.com to plan your visit. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us Saturday, September 30th for our Sobriety Sprint 5K as we remember, honor, and celebrate those who've lost their lives. This family-focused event will feature a 1-mile fun run, inflatables, food trucks, and more. Register to run or honor a loved one at sobrietysprint.com. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We have an artist podcast today, and I'm thrilled because I've got a friend on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. DG Smalling. How are you, mate?
Oh, I can't complain. It is it's a hot day, but it's not as hot as it's been in the past recently, and it's just been a dang good day.
Yeah, I was at a friend's. I was outside about 5:30 last night, and I thought, actually, it feels good. You know, it's not like get me inside, I'm melting, I need AC. I was like, this is kind of, hopefully we're on the down, you know, like September is generally the best month for weather, right? For me, it is anyway.
I don't know, because being in Oklahoma, I think this is a place that could convince you that the creator, God, whoever is schizophrenic. You never know what it's going to be. And you never know when they're going to change their mind or what direction it's going to go. What you do know is that, you know, if we were here like, say, 1,000 years ago and be hanging out, I mean, you've never really lived in Oklahoma until you've been here for that 70-degree day, that day where it quite literally shifts 70 degrees.
Yeah.
When you go from ferocious triple digits or something like that, and before you know it, you have ice. Yeah. Or, you know, it's dropped, and the sky is doing something so terrifying that if we lived 1,000 years ago, we'd be looking for, you know, someone to sacrifice. We'd be going, what can we do to placate the gods? And I'm still thinking we might have to look at that, you know, sometime.
Yeah. Nobody thinks about that, things like that, right? But you're right. Back in the day, like, you know, we don't have an internet, you got nothing going on, and you see the weather change that much, you think a significant event's going to happen. It was how stressed people were living in Oklahoma at that time.
I mean, and what's funny is being in Oklahoma, and Oklahomans, what do? The weather gets funky. over and over again, being downtown and living there downtown for years. For years, my go-to point for anything storm related for safety was the Skirvin. So, and there was a bunch of us that still go down to the Skirvin. We'll take our go bags and we'll hang out until, everything is cleared. And it would turn into like a New Orleans hurricane party where half the people were locals, the other half were obviously visitors, and those who were visitors were just terrified, and the others are having a great time, and what do we do in Oklahoma? We make a party out of it. We go out, we chase it, we look at it, we kind of go, and we are only really able to do that because of the incredible work of the meteorologists and that kind of coverage where we treat it like some kind of sport. Yeah. Where we're betting on it, and
we have drinking games for it.
It's insane. It's quite funny, and that's a true tell that you've acclimated or you've grown up here, how you treat it.
100%. Yeah. So people that might not know who you are, there isn't many, but the people that don't know who you are, when you meet someone in the elevator or you meet someone, what do you tell them?
Well, I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I am privileged to be one of our master artists. I live and have lived here in Oklahoma City for quite some time. My family are from McCurtain County. My clan area is around what's Broken Bow, Ho Chi Town, Eagletown area, the Hill Country, and I work primarily. I'd say my primary focus. I don't really look at the museum, the gallery market, and avenue for art. I really work in the casino space and in the governmental space. I do so. There's nothing wrong with those things. They're not where my focus is. I'm very conscious of this period of time that Indian country is going through, and this period of reclamation, and we have built in a short amount of time the fourth largest land-based casino market in the world, where it goes from C-stores, a convenience store type casinos. We have racinos or racetrack casinos, all the way up to the two largest land-based casinos in the world here. And what's fascinating to me is that it is an industry that the proposition is very simple. 50% of it's art, 50% of it's math. For the casino, for the games themselves, slot games, it's the art that gets you in the seat, but it's the math that keeps you there. And so I noticed that, I work in a space that is very traditional. The function of what I do traditionally would be to articulate, either the will of a nation, will of, governmental will of religious leaders or clerics. But that master level artist would be right at that intersection of commerce, governance, and belief. And so I have the privilege of creating for a capital we, society and culture, which is very different than be creating for an I culture and society and that individualism. So being able to be right in the middle of it, of this expansion, this is completely new. We're not returning to something in this industry. We're creating something wholly new. Being a part of that has afforded me a tremendous amount of purview within Indian country, and not choosing routes of museum, gallery, Indian market, these things. It has it's isolated me from what would normally be the artist community, which is really funny. Consider that here in Oklahoma City, I'm one of our arts commissioners, which is, I know that I'm one of the least artsy artists around. I think of this as that I'm obligated to bear witness. I'm obligated to participate as fully, as in depth, and committed to this period as possible. And that's what I would say I fit. Mm-hmm. There's no one single space that I occupy. It's easier for me to identify where I don't occupy.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before you get into art, like going way back, where does, what did you do before you were an artist, and where does art kind of come into the picture?
Prior to being an artist, I was in the defense work, in the defense industry. Trained as a crisis manager, worked in different areas of the world that were in conflict. But prior to that, my parents worked in conflict aid in areas that were difficult, and primarily in Africa, in Southern Africa in high school, and then in Central Africa, before that. We left the United States when I was 9. So we left the reservation then, and it was quite an interesting shift in life, and I still consider myself a little bit like Rudyard Kipling's character Kim, where Kim was called friend of all the world. There were a period of time that was one of my nicknames. I looked like that little character, that or Mowgli, as a kid, and I now get to do that as an adult here, be the mischievous one, and being always in the middle of interesting things. And so
yeah. Well, so when does you're in the defense world, you're in crisis management. It's not a very artsy place, right? Like most people don't think of art and defense management in the same sentence.
Well, crisis management is
an art form.
Well, it's incredibly creative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all problem solving.
But you don't think of being your art. You don't see an artist in the quote traditional sense. And those two things together. So where does that kind of intervene? And obviously, you pull from so many different things. Like you're extremely well traveled. You've been around a lot. All different cultures, people. You could write 1,000 books on all those things. But how do you kind of draw that, and then where does the journey for being an artist start?
It's interesting because that is an observation that I would say is perhaps quite accurate within the non-native culture. All the different ones here in Oklahoma, but in Indian country, it is perfectly normal.
Okay.
I mean, we look back and we look at, for instance, post World War II, we have A.C. Blue Eagle, who was a master artist of his nation, incredibly successful commercially with Kerr McGee, Phillips, and others, Conoco, doing projects and collaborations. You have this long, rich line up into there are many more, but including people like recently departed Chief Enoch Kelly Haney. Mm-hmm. We have, there are more, but as an illustration of those living here in Oklahoma, we have Chief. I say chief because within the Cheyenne, he is a peace chief. So Chief Harvey Pratt. Mm-hmm. I mean, he being a combat veteran from Vietnam. Yeah. I mean, this is a normal thing.
Okay.
That you are achieving your name. You're taking your name. You're taking your place in your society. Mm-hmm. Your obligations, and then you have a license to do with what you will afterwards. And so there is a normalcy of going that route.
Okay.
And that normalcy means that you bring to bear the discipline. Mm-hmm. So I tell people that the discipline that had kept me alive was the discipline that was going to give me a life. and it has given me a life. And so I would say that one of the things that even going into that life prior was lessons that I learned when I left the reservation. We were in Switzerland, and the couple that owned the house that we lived in, they also lived in the building. One of the things that he instructed me on was in woodworking. Be in the workshop with him, and he was this very fastidiously dressed, precise man with bespoke shirt and an ascot, and he never wore a smock. I mean, the chagrin on his face. But if are you not going to wear a smock? Well, do you intend to make a mess? I mean, and finally, when it came time for me to make my own project with him, he brought out these slats of mahogany, and we're going to make this ship together. And he pulls out a Mont Blanc pen, and when you pick up a Mont Blanc as a kid for the first time, it's hard to tell. I mean, the reference point of engineering and quality suddenly becomes apparent between that big pen or whatever you were using before and this. And I was using dip calligraphy pens in the schools in Switzerland that I went to. And I remember, well, what if I make a mistake? And he looked at me and he goes, you will think thoroughly and you will mark once. Pencil breeds error. If you give a human the option of error, the human will take it. And I'm 10 years old getting this lesson. And it's fascinating because now what am I known for from the style of artwork? It's a single line. I think thoroughly. I mark once. That's what I do for a living. During working with crises, you can't help the environment that you're dropped in, but the expectation is that you're not only going to be able to navigate it, but you're going to be able to lead in it. And you will think thoroughly. You will mark, hopefully once, more often than that. But that's a mindset that's been with me. I'm not Teutonic that way, but
it's amazing when you look back, right? It's always, I say this, I think, on probably 90% of the podcasts I do. It's always easier looking back and putting the dots together. At the time, you're 10 years old thinking, this guy's wild. What am I doing here? The things
Very
you're hearing
so.
at the time, and there's so many points like that along our life, but it is easier when you go back and you're like, oh, that's why. Little lessons like that, why I am who I am, why I do what I do.
Very much so. And I'm not, I would say that the practical, how it fleshes out practically now in my career, because in the beginning when I shifted to art, I would, another Oklahoma City firm, Pirates Alley, the family, they were friends with a woman who was very much like my grandmother that helped me, understand the business of art or fine art. There are many artists in my family who are professional artists, but they're musicians, session musicians in Nashville or wherever. So the idea of being an artist was always accepted. But it was accepted as a profession that if you're going to do it, you do it professionally. You do it with the discipline. You make a life out of it. So when I went into it, I went with that mindset of rigor and repetition to work on technique. So I worked a deal out with Rose and them over at Pirates Alley, and I would get scraps. Bins and bins, and we went through thousands of them, to just work on the technique of the one line, and being very comfortable with it now. I liken myself more to the literary character by Rex Stout, Nero Wolfe, who's exceedingly lazy, resents having to work. And when he does so, commits wholly so he can get it over with, and I think that's me.
Yeah.
Now, and I find it funny because I don't procrastinate on projects. It's kind of the opposite. I want to get it done. I want to get it over with so I can keep going back to cooking or whatever I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. Traveling. Yeah. No, it's awesome. Earlier you mentioned kind of the two kind of spaces that you're in. You said casino space and governmental space. Casino space is, you know, the gaming, the artwork. A lot, you know, like you said, it's kind of art and math. The government space, is it more like gifting? Is that kind of where you get?
There are some like that where I'll be hired to or be commissioned to gift. But for instance, here at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, unfortunately, during COVID, we had scheduled an exhibition, or really a viewing of a body of work. There were 7 matriarchs, portraits of living matriarchs that were, and the exhibition is a part of a U.S. Department of Interior, U.S. Department of Justice collection related to Operation Lady Justice, which was the first federal multi-agency task force related to what is now, we've adopted the Canadian term from the First Nations, the murdered and missing Indigenous women.
Okay.
This was prior to that adoption of the terminology, and that task force was the largest multi-agency of its force of its kind, and Oklahoma receives, unfortunately, an extraordinary amount of emphasis. And I was fortunate that the leadership within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the director at the time, Tara Katuk-Sweeney, was a fan of the work and knew where I stood on this issue, both within my family, within the nation, within Choctaw Nation, and adopted an artwork to be the model or be the logo, but also the title. You know, it became a center point for the meetings. It still is in their conference rooms, that conference room where they meet, and that collection that was here at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame was an homage to 7 women who that I know personally who have made significant impacts upon the life of people at large, women in particular. That's where I fit in the governmental.
Okay.
You know, I'm privileged, and also here in Oklahoma we have, because of the removals and the different death marches that brought people here from different parts of the continent, we have 2 Delaware nations, or traditionally they're Lenape people, from what would be the northeastern part of the United States. And the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, I enjoy a very deep relationship with, to the extent that they issued a statute for me, which says that D.G. Smalling may create with full faith and sanction any and all Delaware/Lenape designs.
Wow.
The reason being is that they do not have an artist like me, and we are trying to address issues not only like cultural appropriation. We're trying to address issues like how do we actually get day-to-day materials that reflect who we are as a people, and how do we also turn a profit and try to find other avenues of revenue. And what I've been tasked with by this government is to do those things. And the first one is using a strategy that I've wanted to beta for years, and that is the problem being, how do we thwart or frustrate cultural appropriation? And it was a strategy that I put together of that's simply using what I would call a cultural collaboration. And there's a whole program behind that I employ. And it's an interesting thing when you can create not just for your own, like for instance, with my own nation, to the governmental, when we were finalizing our cultural center in Durant, there's the traveling and moving exhibition spaces, and then we have one permanent exhibition. And I got a call from Chief Batten that wanted me to do the final piece. And the area is a 10-foot by 24-foot area, the last thing you see. And the title is Our Future. There's a whole other subtitle that I use that's in Choctaw. But that, and I remember talking to him and saying, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, our future? Like, what do you, and he goes, no, you just go for it. I'm like, oh, good Lord. So in those situations, it's an extraordinary thing to be able to create for people or peoples, where the artwork is by mandate, by design, a part of history, a part of their identity. It is a focal point of where we are going. And I want to put a caveat on the next statement. I am not a cultural preservationist. I'm a cultural conservationist. Mm-hmm. By that I mean that I do not want to artificially preserve something from the past, because, and I say that because I think of my grandmother. You go into the kitchen, you open up the fridge, and she's kept all kinds of tins or plastic containers, and it's like a crapshoot. What's going to be in one of those,
right? And
how long it's been there. So when you talk about a petri dish or preserving something artificially, you're creating a situation by definition that it doesn't respond to an outside atmosphere. It's contained, and we all know what happens. It started, chowder, and in 2 weeks it's slurry. It's not normal.
Yeah.
I am a strict cultural conservationist because I recognize that much of what was considered Choctaw or Chickasha, Chickasaw, because we're so close,
yeah,
is irredeemably gone. But that has zero implications upon my identity and the viability of my identity. And as such, it's the personal agency of defining ourselves that's important, and the exercise of it. And that's where the conservation comes in. So I don't look to the past for where I'm going, in the sense that I don't want to replicate what's in the past. I need to understand what's in the past so that when I create the artworks for the Delaware, for Choctaw Nation, or for whomever I work with, that my work is about how then shall we live? How do we move forward? What does it mean to move forward? What does it mean? And how to do it? Not because I don't want to deal with the past. In fact, my work deals more with the past and research than most. And the projects that I do, 10 years, like for instance, one that was announced, the findings after 10 years of research with Baroness Nicholson, Emma Nicholson of the Winterbourne, who's a member of the House of Lords in the UK. There are only 4 of these reports.
Yeah.
This represents 1,000 documents, a permanent archive at the Bodleian Library at Oxford University, and it is the single largest repository of land transactions and land documents related to Chickasaws. I would say with confidence that more than proves that I know how to deal with history. Yeah. And I'm doing the same thing right now in Genoa. We're working with historians and financial historians on Banco de San Giorgio, which is the first Western bank and the first Western multinational corporation. And it's actually the reason why you and I are even at this table. One boardroom decision creates Western expansionism, employs at Columbus and others, and we're in this room.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I enjoy using the past and understanding the past, but it does not define where I'm going.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
That's where I fit in the governmental.
Gotcha.
Now the commercial side, the gaming side, that is on the corporate side. It's a very untethered experience. It's fun, but it's funny because within the tribal gaming side, it's a function of government,
right?
And so one never knows what kind of commission or collection will come out of it. Mm-hmm. One could be entirely historical based, creating new types of metaphor. One could be, we don't want that at all.
Right.
We want something just horse. I enjoy the commissions. Mm-hmm. I tell other artists, being a professional artist with commissions is the only proof positive that you're professional, because you look at a professional athlete, what separates a professional athlete from an Olympian gets a prize at the end mm-hmm. for winning, but they don't get paid for practice.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're a professional at something, that you get paid to practice.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that wish that you were professionals and got paid to practice, that's for sure. Especially after putting 4 years of practice in to get, gold medal or whatever.
And the gaming is fantastic because it leads to collaborations, and it goes back to the cultural collaboration component of being able to use designs and imageries and motifs in a way that is compelling. Now it's compelling in terms of visual, it's not just an aesthetic of curiosity, that it is actually a viable product or a series. And I think that's fascinating to me, because that is it would not be possible for me to explore this if it wasn't for the casino market and the gaming market, and the willingness on the part of eminent actors within that space who reach out to me over the years to collaborate. They recognize that not only is it the ethical thing to do, but it is something that from a aesthetic perspective sets yourself apart such that your work becomes visually beautiful and compelling. And I like that.
Yeah, you're right. You're very good at what you do, and you're in a unique position, right? And you get those people reaching out, and you don't know what they might want, but that's the exciting part too. Like I said, you might be designing an entire game, you might be doing the back of a chair, or you might be doing some piece that's going to go. Yeah, it could be whatever, right? That's the exciting part about it. Not just like stuck to one thing.
Like, just an example, and I promise you this is not a product placement of experience, but it's inevitable that if we're going to talk about this subject, we're going to have to show something. Mm-hmm. So we talk about the Delaware Nation.
Yeah.
So one of the designs that they have in motif is teme, which is their wolf. And so we have a wolf here.
Yeah.
So this wolf, yes, it's a label to a beer, but you notice that what we did with this was, as a beta, there's no color. This is like, let's prove that this as a focus group works. So I didn't get remunerated. Delaware Nation didn't get remunerated on this. This is something that we wanted to do, just see how people would experience it. Now, we partnered with this with Skydance Brewery. Why? First and only native-owned brewery in Oklahoma City, and the two principal owners are not only native, but Jake, he's the chairman or chief of his tribe, the Iowa. And so when you read it, yes, there's the little bit about the contents and the composition, but what we're really talking about here is we're making the artwork for Teme Wolf was created, and the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma has authorized him to create artwork on the tribal designs and assets and rather than purely reactive response to cultural appropriation, this collaboration is a proactive demonstration of how to work with tribal nations to support their cultural sovereignty. Now, it seems odd that it's a can of beer, but Oklahoma City is the capital of Indian country. Not just in the United States, but we're the capital of Indian country. We don't fit any kind of normalcy in North America. And because we shouldn't behave like we do. We're at a point where we have, at the state government, we have good, bad, and different. We have a governor who's a citizen of one nation. We have 3 justices out of the 9 that are native. We have within our legislature at the state level, we have an Indian caucus. We have within our different, at the mayoral level here in Oklahoma City, we have our first native mayor, who's Osage. It's gone from being a citizenship being a non-start and an albatross around your neck as an option to being an asset. And it's done that in my lifetime.
Right.
And so exploring this is as much a function, and exploring cultural collaboration is as much a function of how Indian country has options, but it's also a way of us demonstrating that in the 21st century, non-Indian country, this is how you can participate and correctly collaborate with us, and we can create something that's very beautiful in Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah.
And so they seem simple, but these are these beta little steps that we're going towards a more, as Lincoln said, a more perfect union.
I mean, perfect segue. Let's talk about the coins, because that's the most recent.
This is the most recent.
And I know how excited you are about these, because I remember you telling me about them for maybe 6 months ago, maybe longer. It was Christmas time, actually, because I was at it was one of the Christmas things you threw, maybe at the, no, it wasn't. It was Pasole. What time of year was that? Christmas? November?
Late
Close
November.
to it. Yeah, late November. There we go.
Was it late November? Or
Maybe.
mid-November,
Yeah.
It was readily about.
My partner's here. She
Callie's
has
here.
all that. That's its own other episode.
That is.
But so AppMex.
Yeah.
AppMex is one of these. AppMex has been around for 21 years in Oklahoma City. It's based here. It's from here. The CEO or the founders from here, and rightfully they've stayed very quiet because of what they do. And now they're beginning to become more public about their presence in Oklahoma City. They occupy the old Federal Reserve building downtown, which is across the street from my studio.
Okay.
And about a year ago, I get this call, early one morning that, Mr. Smalling, we would like to, explore the possibility of collaborating with you. And so I said, well, it's really early in the morning. Have you had coffee yet? And they're like, no. And I said, well, obviously you're across the street from me. You know where I live and where I work. Yeah, why don't you just come over? And so when they came in, the first conversation was, first thing it said was, Mr. Smalling, we would like to be affiliated with your brand. To which I said I wasn't aware I had one. And it just was, it was a very interesting experience because, and I'm in an interesting, good way, because when I'm collaborating with projects or industry or a product that have no reference to the method and the processes, I realize that I'm actually the impediment at first because I'm the novice, and I'm being granted a lot of grace because I am the novice, because I want to know, because I always come in with the expectation, being me, that this is not going to be a one-time thing. I want to keep at this. And so the one-line method is actually an asset to the design process. And what we wanted to do, we were looking at broader things that we could, collaborate on. And I thought, let's do something, have a component of it that says, as a statement, that we're both from Oklahoma City. This is our home. It doesn't mean that we don't take that project elsewhere. And in this city, I'm very privileged to have artwork in different governmental buildings. And with the mayor, he being Osage and having known him for quite some time, as he was running for office, it was very clear he was going to win. He was like, "Dee, I want something to celebrate this victory. I want some," and it's not. And as he put it, it wasn't just his victory; it was the fact that there's now a place for us in Indian country. There isn't a limit where we can go, and being Osage, the importance within the Osage of the buffalo. And the beauty of the municipal building here in Oklahoma City is that Art Deco mixture at a period of time in which the designers were looking for a native-esque motif. So I created a grand buffalo for him that's 5 foot by 8 foot, and it is within the kind of feel of an Art Deco. Mm-hmm. And the coin itself is that on one side. And then at the Oklahoma Judicial Center, I did a portrait for the Oklahoma Supreme Court of the court that was seated at the time when they moved from the Oklahoma State Capitol mm-hmm. to the Judicial Center, still retaining the courtroom in the Capitol, but they consolidated all their employees, and so it's called the Oklahoma 9. And one part of it is this deconstruction on leather of the Osage shield, the calumet, okay. And then the olive branch. But unlike other depictions, I did not do it in a single line. This one is. That particular piece is very accurate in terms of the feathers, in terms of the stitch work, the type, and the stars, not the crosses, but the stars that are on the Osage shield. And so it's using, to the accuracy of P7, P5, and the P1 eagle feathers that are actually on the shield. Yeah. And so we created a coin, but it's almost like the city and the zip code. The city and the state. And the copper ones we've done, so that we're going to have them in gift shops, we're going to have them in museums, we're going to have them in hotels, so that they pay for the reminting, so that the office of the mayor and the municipal building will be stocked with coins. And we've chosen, both APMEX and myself, not to have our signatures on it. Okay. Not to have their logo, brand, or myself on it. Even though it's clearly my artwork, we're not doing it. Why? We want it to be our city's coin and to reflect where we are now. And so, like, for instance, this is the coin, copper. There's the buffalo, and there's the shield. And then the silver version of the same. There's this one, and these are the proofs. Yeah. And there's also one that's limited that will have coloration on it. It's beautiful. And then this is what we have at the mayor's office now. So when his guests come in and others, because I was thinking if we do prints, it could get damaged, and then that's a whole level of other things that, right. The staff there have to take care of in terms of the tubes and the packing tubes, the mailing tubes, and all that. Whereas this you're not going to damage this. And so the idea of being able to hand this out, you have this, which talks about APMEX, talks about me and how this happened. But this is also a fascinating component. With all the work I do in collaboration, I always keep this little logo. This is the Indian Arts and Crafts Act logo. Okay. Because what this is a federal logo, which is a proof that this is truly Native American artwork. This is legitimate. And then there are these, so that you have the packet that will travel easy. And it's simple. I think these kinds of projects are the definition of cultural collaboration that we will see hopefully done more and more here in Oklahoma. And I hope that we get past the idea that it needs to be done solely for the ethics of it. And I hope that we begin to realize that it is a function of great aesthetic beauty. It creates much more, the options become multitudinous, and we're able to, in a creative way, deal with a very difficult past, because the past of Oklahoma is difficult.
Very.
And that's also like the projects in general, where Western expansionism began. I have an exhibition that I'm going to be doing in general where it deals with the idea, and I can argue quite easily that Oklahoma City is the last colonial capital, because when this place was established as a municipality, it was within a territory, and it was an administrative capital of a territory, which is the definition. And to look at the two as bookends and to explore what that means, and to do what I've been doing with the Baroness Nicholson in the UK, but to do this now in the birthplace of what created the chaos, but not in a punitive way, but in a way that looks at the confluence that has that single boardroom decision is a substantial import to humankind as when some creature decided to walk out of or slither out of the water. There isn't a way for one mind or a group of minds to conceive a way of disentangling its effect, both genetically, both in terms of the ideas, the confluences, the chaos, the creativity, good, bad, indifferent creativity that's been let loose. I find Oklahoma City is a place where the detritus has had such vastly disproportionate impact upon the world in 100 years. What's come out of here in 100 years is testament to the dynamism of what the Genoveses started. That huge, calamitous migration of peoples, and then this being where it ended. That to me, the intellectual side of me can feed on this for the rest of my life. The artistic side, and I tell people, if I can't create artwork out of this, then I suck. and I find it fascinating that it's through the collaborations in gaming, and through being able to continually flesh out my beliefs, do I believe in this strategy of cultural collaboration, that I'm able then to take those relationships and apply them into the next phase, which is, this is the confluence, and, being able to work with great minds and to be able to play with that. And the response has been consistently affirming, not just that's great work, but how can we participate? Can we participate? And like this one, this is a beta. I haven't even done anything with this. This is a laser etching from a document. This is the incorporation of the first bank.
Okay.
And with the ledger book style, I'm going to play with this. So I do these things as betas, but it's weird to have this now around the studio, and it's been around for a while. I'll look at it thinking I should do something on it, but I'm looking at this is what started it. And to know that I'll be the first to create with it. Over and over again, I get to be the first at doing something. And that goes back to that Nero Wolfe kind of comment where I'm so lazy. I'm lazy because I don't want to be the second at it, because if I'm the second at it, I have to adhere to someone's rules. If I'm there first, then I get to make the rule. And so that's where the laziness gets in. And it's going to be fascinating because the artwork will be an expression of not only what Oklahoma is, but the city. You know, conversations that I have where now looking at what will it be like in a couple of years when in business, some of my affiliations in Indian country, when we are going to Genoa, we're going to these places doing business. And, you know, looking at full circle for the first time in 500 years. What does that mean? And instead of it being on someone else's terms, to be doing it on our own. And there's not in a punitive way, but in a way that's contemplative, that understands that it's that Doctor Who paradigm that we've talked about. It's that question of time travel. If I could go back and change something, would I? And I look at, you know, my partner Kelly. You look at Taryn. You know, we look at these people who are a confluence of peoples, and realize that if I touch one part of it, I don't have that person in my life. And the question then is, you know, how to move forward in a better way. So some of the projects that I'm doing, one of the exhibitions is on banking. So looking at, you know, a contemporary multinational bank that remains anonymous right now, and Banco de San Giorgio, where I'm working with a financial historian, and he and I are playing the role of executor of a will, and it's not even commenting upon what this contemporary is. It's saying this is what you've inherited as a multinational. And then doing the same with another multinational, not to be named yet, but as a corporation doing the same. Mm-hmm. The reason why these are functional now as query is that just as Genoa and that boardroom decision inexorably transformed humankind, our boardroom decisions with AI have, whether or not we realize it right now, we may not feel it right now because it's slowly, good, bad, and different, it has slowly enveloped modern life. Whether or not you know it, you are cushioned, enveloped by it, that we have just gone through the advent of something as important as when that primordial sludge slithered out again. Mm-hmm. And the question now is, how then do we live? How do we encounter, how do we inform these meta extensions of ourselves in a way, hopefully, better than the last time? Mm-hmm. And I find Oklahoma City, oddly enough, a place of great import because it is a place that is going to experience such upheaval because of genetics, genetic therapeutics, genomics, as applied by machine learning, as applied by AI, where Indian country is going to transform in a disproportionate effect. And in our lifetime, we will inhabit that experience. And I hope that we do it better than in the past. You know, these great milestones. And so the artwork for me is, when people thought, you know, when I first started getting involved in Indian country and gaming and all that, no one believed when I said we were going then. You know, and now I get away with this nonsense. I could call it nonsense, but I mean, I love the fact that I can be here in Oklahoma City and observe as a bystander, participate if I want to, and these things are fleshing themselves out, and I get to participate, and the artwork's just going to become better, and that means I don't have to leave. I can do it here. You know, that's awesome.
Yeah. We could talk for days. We generally do. But in the interest of people driving and listening, and generally how I keep these podcasts to an hour, we're quickly running out of time. And Kelly's got somewhere to go. With the coins. So these are going in gift shops, being around. They'll be in the city, people to buy them and use them as gifts and give them to friends. That's right. And all the rest of it.
The website, you know, it's. And I have to say, and again, back to this hidden Goliath. I mean, AppMex is one of the world's largest private mints. It's one of the world's largest private, you know, repositories and brokers of precious metals. I mean, it's astonishing what they do. And I have to say that the creative process with them has been a pleasure, because it's been fun. It's been, they're as ornery as I am. And I've enjoyed it. I mean, it is an amazing thing and a testament to the city that when I think of the back-end supported companies that make my life work, and my collaborations here in the United States, that a significant proportion of them are I'm on Dean McGee, right next to the courthouse. So are they. So have been the law firm that has represented me for a long time. If you go up to 11th Street, it's pretty much there. Like, my life is right there, the functionality of it. So that in a capital city of the United States, I get to live a small town experience. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. It's a very nice way of living. And so I'm terribly spoiled that way. Terribly spoiled.
A great restaurant around you as well.
Yes.
Have we trained the most recent barista to make your coffee across the street?
No, I've given up.
I've given up? Okay.
I've given up.
Sorry to bring that up.
I've given up. And what he's referring to is, when I'm in Genova, it is a type of coffee that you do find around Italy, but it's most notably tied to Genoa, and it's called Marocchino.
Okay.
And the Marocchino to me is a glorious, glorious thing.
It's great coffee. We shared one. Well, we had one each, but it was good. Till we meet again, we're probably going to do these at least 10, 15 times over the duration of our lifetimes, having podcasts and telling great stories, because you have so many, and I plan to do this podcast until I can't speak anymore.
There's going to come a day when I get to switch here, and we get to talk about Wales.
We can talk about
how you came here.
Yeah, that's a story.
And that will that'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll have to do that, and I'm gonna have to get myself one of those coins, and maybe in a dream world figure out how to collaborate one day. You know, it's kind of funny. I'm looking at my laptop and I've got my two logos in front of me, and Wales does one of the best logos in the world, Red Dragon, and then obviously this is Oklahoma's logo. I think it's pretty cool. Shout out to Michael who designed it for me. But yeah, maybe we'll have a collaboration one day. But
most definitely.
Until then, I look forward to sharing some calf meat probably in the near future with you guys.
That's right.
Having a couple of drinks and having a good time. So thanks for spending an hour with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
For people listening, I will put a link to DG's Instagram and maybe another link that you can go find the coins at. And yeah, we'll catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is presented by the Choctaw Nation. The Choctaw people have a rich history and a bright future. At the Choctaw Cultural Center, you can take part in a story 14,000 years in the making. Stroll through our immersive exhibits portraying Choctaw life from the moment our ancestors emerged from the Nani Weha in Mississippian homelands to the Trail of Tears, where we lost so many loved ones, and finally to the modern-day tribe making a positive impact on local communities throughout southeastern Oklahoma. Try your hand at our social dancing and stickball and learn more about our vibrant culture through demonstrations, workshops, and classes. The kids will have a blast in our Luxie Activity Center. The Choctaw Cultural Center is more than a museum. It's a living, breathing experience. Visit choctawculturalcenter.com to plan your visit. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us Saturday, September 30th for our Sobriety Sprint 5K as we remember, honor, and celebrate those who've lost their lives. This family-focused event will feature a 1-mile fun run, inflatables, food trucks, and more. Register to run or honor a loved one at sobrietysprint.com.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.